those. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? Good. For those who are sitting in the back, we still have some seat in front. If you want to move in front, maybe. No, you're good there. Okay. Nadia doesn't bite. Sure. Okay. Thank you for coming to another Dojo event. My name is Auntie. I'm the event coordinator of Dojo, and today we're having one of our members to give us a talk about web design for entrepreneurs and freelancers. Give a applause for Nadia. Yeah, so I picked at the presentation before, and it's really good, really complex. And I'm sure you're going to learn a lot of things today. The event will be about 1 hour, so 45 minutes talk and 15 minutes question and answer afterwards. So if you have question, raise your hand. The best to wait till the microphone comes to you. So I will be around with the microphone because we also stream this event live, so that your questions is recorded and you can also watch the recording of the event too afterwards. Okay, I think that's all from me. Enjoy the event. This is Nadia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here today. I know some of you are skipping the ecstatic dance or the sunset, so it means a lot to me. I'm Nadia, and I'm a UX designer or user experience designer, which basically means I design apps and websites. So I work with startups and established companies to help them create a better user experience. A better user experience, like in this situation, providing better sound. But I deal more with the visual side of things, as well as defining the functionality of the product, the functionality of the website, so the overall user experience. Any designers here today, by the way? Okay, so we have a couple. Who here has a website? So most of you guys, who here has some kind of software product, an app, web app, mobile app? Okay, also we have a few people. Awesome, so this talk is gonna be useful for you then. If you want to just learn in generally more about design, it's also cool because there's gonna be a lot of information here that's useful for beginners. So if you wanna get into design or you just want to, you're kind of exploring what to do next. I think there are a lot of people in Bali like that. So you can learn a bit more about design in general, about the process of design and so on. So what is design? Can anyone give me a definition of design in your understanding, like in your own words? Anyone? Okay, how a website looks. Any other ideas? The organization of elements. Cool. Okay, these are good answers. These are all correct answers. But I prefer this definition. I like the definition of design as a purpose or planning behind an object or a fact or a service. It can literally be anything, but basically it's the purpose of what you're creating or the planning. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what is bad design. So we're going to see what happens when something is poorly designed. And hopefully after this, we will all agree that design is very important. Then we're going to talk about what is good design. We're going to define what is poor design. Then we're going to see how we can get to good design. Then we're going to talk about design thinking, which is basically a framework for doing good design. And then we're going to move on to some of the more hands-on techniques and principles that you can use to improve your website or product. So what is bad design? Can anyone tell me what is wrong with this door? It's contradicting signs. Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, the signs are not contradicting. There's only one sign, and it says push, but there's a handle. And us as humans, we see the handle and we pull. and you're not even going to notice the sign, even though it seems like it's pretty clear. You're just going to pull this door. And I'm sure it happened to every single person in this room, where you pull the door that's meant to be pushed, or you push the door that's meant to be pulled. This is a perfect example of really poor design, or rather just lack of design. So this door was built or installed, purchased by someone who didn't think about how it's going to be used. So there was no planning behind this door, and there should have been. It would be a much better user experience. I think so. I think so, yes. There's actually a name for this phenomenon. It's called the Norman door. And it's named so after Don Norman, who is a bit of a legendary figure in the design industry. He's a big advocate of user-centered design. He's written many books. One of them is called Design of Everyday Things. And he talks a lot about how so many products we use every single day are poorly designed because not enough people learn about design, not enough people apply design thinking to solving everyday problems. Another example of this could be a remote control for your TV. Like, do you really need to have 50 buttons on your remote control? You have no idea how it works. It's poorly designed. You're performing 5 actions maybe. Every day you should have 5 buttons and the rest maybe should be hidden. You know, things like that. On the web, there's a lot of really poor design just because of how easy it is to put something on the web. So here we have a landing page. The headline is absolutely unreadable. And it's a very common mistake that I see people make when you're putting up a landing page, especially when you're using some kind of builder like Wix or Squarespace, you're using a theme. Themes are usually designed with specific content and context in mind. And then when you take this theme and you start manipulating the photos, the headlines, etc., you take it out of a context, and then we end up with stuff like that, where you're replacing a photo, and all of a sudden, it's just a poor photo choice. It's too contrasty, so you can't read the text on it. It can be solved by doing something like this, but most people don't really think in these terms. Most people create a website, and they do what looks good to them, what feels good to them, and they don't think how it's going to be used by their customer or their user. And you know, it's not your fault, just because most people are not taught certain methods to doing good design. You know, not everyone has to do that, but hopefully after today you'll be able to design better products. This is another example. So this is a dashboard, some kind of SaaS product. I just found it online. And at first glance, it looks like there's nothing wrong with this. But actually, it's not a very well-designed dashboard, because if you look at these graphs here, different colors mean different things. Different colors represent different sets of data, but these colors look the same. If you're really good with colors, maybe you'll be able to tell the difference. Maybe you will also think that visually it looks okay. You know, these colors are nice colors, but it's not very readable. So it's not solving the problem for the user, which is representing data in a clear way. Furthermore, actually, because this dashboard is using primarily green and red color together, this is how colorblind users will see the dashboard. It all looks the same. And there are a lot of people who are colorblind, and there are a lot of people who are borderline colorblind, and using red and green in one design will lead to something like this, unreadable. Okay, so it's fairly easy to pinpoint what is bad design, because when people see good design, they don't see any design. People expect things to work. So when you're filling out a form, you know, you're going through online store checkout, let's say. You're filling out a form, and it works perfectly. You're not going to be like, oh my God, this form is amazing. Oh my God, it's so smooth. It's working. You take it for granted. But when it's a shit form and something's not working, you're annoyed and you abandon the cart and you don't make a purchase. So it's very easy to see bad design. It's very difficult to see good design, but I found some examples. So I think it's a very good example of good design. MailChimp has recently redesigned their website. They went through rebranding, and I'm not going to talk about the visuals and the style, etc., even though I am into it. But I think it's a really good example of dealing with complex website navigation and a lot of links in a very smart way. So instead of having a very long list of links, they're actually categorizing them. They're using nice icons to represent different categories. And it's very easy for the user to skim through things and find what they need. And also, it's hidden. So on their website, when the drop down is hidden, you only see the most important stuff. So this is good design. Does anyone know what it is? What is this app? Revolut, yeah. Revolut has an outstanding user experience, especially compared to all the other applications in their industry. Banking apps are really, really bad. I don't know if you guys are using apps of your local banks, but for example, I have a bank account in Poland, and I'm forced to use their app. It's really, really bad experience compared to Revolut. And it's not just because it looks good. It's very intuitive. So Revolut app seems very simple. It seems like anyone can use it, yet it's so powerful that you never have to do anything outside of the app. So it's an example of really, really good design. Is Facebook good design? Anyone? You're allowed to say that it's really bad or good. Good? Exactly. So, it's controversial. I think visually, Facebook is not very appealing. I think it's not very good design on the one hand. On the other hand, millions or I don't know, billions of people can't get their hands off of Facebook every single day. So maybe it's genius design. It's serving its purpose perfectly. So the point I'm trying to make is that design is not just about visuals. Visuals are just a small part of any website or product design. Design is so much more than that. Design is about its functionality, about what the product does, about how it does it, and for whom. What problem is it solving? It's all design. So how do you good design? It's not a simple question. So if we say that design is not just about the visuals, it's about the purpose, the strategy, how it does it, what it does, it becomes really, really complex. So there's a methodology for approaching problems like that. There's a process that designers go through to create good designs. And the reason why designers are better at designing than other people is because they're really good at applying this process. So if you take away one thing from this talk, it's this: you have to learn to apply design thinking to solving problems. So when you are creating a website, when you are creating an app or a Facebook ad or a newsletter, apply some design thinking. And you don't have to go through all steps, but we'll talk a little bit about it, how you can apply design thinking to your specific situation. This is something user experience designers say all the time. We repeat it so often that it actually became a bit of a meme or a cliche, but I think it doesn't make it untrue. You're not your customer and you're not your user. And us as humans, we're very prone to developing and getting trapped into our own bias. We make assumptions. We see the world through our own eyes, through our own bias. That's how we go through this world, and it's normal. But there's a way to look at things through your customer's perspective or through your user's perspective, and it's the only way you're going to get to good design. You have to put yourself into your customers' or users' shoes. So the first step is to empathize. You have to be interested in your customers or your users. You have to do your research, you have to talk to them, interview them, do whatever you need to do to understand their needs, their pain points, and their habits. So you need to understand what their day looks like. If you're, say, designing a website for them or you're developing an app for them, you have to understand how is it going to fit into their lifestyle, into their life. Why are they going to use it? Why are they going to choose it over someone else's website or someone else's product? So you really need to understand your customers and your users to do that. Then you need to define exactly what kind of problem you're solving. So it's easy to make an assumption, okay, this is a problem for my user. This is a problem worth solving. But you need to dig deeper. You need to ask why. And you need to define the problem very clearly. It has to be so clear that you write it down and it makes sense to everyone. Like, read it out loud to your friends. And if they're asking questions, maybe you need to go back to the drawing board. You have to generate a lot of ideas. That's another way designers get better at creating good designs. So I think a lot of people stop after creating one or two versions of something. The way designers create good designs, they create many, many, many versions. They iterate. That's how you get to good design. You have to ideate and brainstorm, and then you have to be detached from your ideas, and you have to discard ruthlessly. You have to keep maybe one or two best ideas and then act on them. So at this stage, you can literally talk to anyone. You can talk to your friends, talk to your mom. The more different people you will talk to, the more different perspectives you can see, and you can understand a problem from a different perspective. So you have to gather as much opinions and data as possible at this stage. And then you test. So once you choose a few different ideas, maybe one or two, you have to test them. So people in marketing understand this really well, I think. You create a few different versions and you test them. You see which one does better. If you're creating a website, you can write down the copy and literally give it to, you're a freelancer, for example, give it to your current clients and ask them what they think. Does it resonate with them? You can draw a sketch. You can create a very simple landing page before you create a full-on website. The reason why you want to do this is you don't want to be attached to ideas that are actually not good. You're going to be making assumptions and you're going to be making mistakes. So you have to test so early that it's going to be easy for you to discard the idea if it turns out to be bullshit. So you have to go back and you have to come up with something else. So don't make it difficult for yourself. Don't invest all your time and effort before testing ideas. So yeah, that's basically design thinking, and that's the methodology behind any design project, really. It's behind any graphic design project, web design, products, you name it. And you can apply it to pretty much any project to generate more ideas and to create better solutions. So yeah, this was kind of very vague, right? So we people talk about methodologies a lot, blah 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 blah, very cool. But we're gonna talk about some actionable stuff as well. So we're gonna talk about hierarchy, contrast, typography, and white space. There's much more that I could talk about. Of course, there's much more to design than that. But I think these are the basics that you have to get right. Otherwise, your website or your product will be literally unusable. And it doesn't matter if you have a good idea or not, it will just fail, because these four things really affect the usability of your product. So did everyone read this in this exact order? Probably most of you. And there's a reason for that. So our attention is naturally drawn to objects that are high contrast, that are bigger, that stand out to us somehow. So when you're designing a website, a landing page, any kind of product, hierarchy is extremely important to usability. You want to make sure that your customers or your users' attention is drawn to the right elements. So, the CTA button, for example, has to be visible. It has to be bright enough so your customer clicks on it. And there are many, many other situations where hierarchy will be crucial. So one thing that people do, I think, all the times make things bigger in attempt to make it stand out. Sometimes it's a good strategy, but not always, because there are many other things you can do to emphasize a certain element. So you can manipulate the object's color, font type, font weight, its background color, or perhaps neighboring objects. So what is this object surrounded by? How are they drawing attention to the object or maybe away from it? So it's something that you have to be mindful of. Another way to emphasize the important stuff is to de-emphasize the unimportant. So let's say we have 2 paragraphs of text and you want to emphasize the first paragraph. Yeah, you can make the first paragraph bigger. It's not always going to make sense or look good. Instead, you could maybe place a different background color behind the first paragraph, or you could change the second paragraph's weight or color, make it maybe dark gray instead of black. So things like that. So here, the secondary paragraph looks secondary because it's gray and not black. It's also a little smaller. So you can also use a few different techniques on top of each other to de-emphasize or emphasize an element. The proximity of objects, it's super, super important. So here, as you can see, we have 4 different circles, but they're all clearly related. It's because they're close to each other. There's this black circle right here, and it's really far away from them. Even though it looks the same as these two, it looks like it's definitely not related to them. So it's very important. For example, if you're designing a landing page and you have a headline and some text and a CTA button, and then some other headlines and text and CTA buttons, they have to be somehow grouped together. And proximity between those 3 objects is one thing you have to control, and you have to make sure they're close enough to each other so they look related. So just a little exercise here. This is something you will see on pretty much every e-commerce store. Just a product name, photo, some information about the product, and the buy me button, or place to cart or whatever. Everything looks the same, and we have to somehow style it to make it not the same, to make it easier to digest the information. The way people consume information on the web or anywhere really, they skim through things. So when people go through a list of products, what they want to see the photo, the name of the product, the price. This is it pretty much. If they're really interested, they want to be able to find the extra information, but it's not that important. You, as an e-commerce store owner, really want them to see the buy me button for sure. Here, they won't really see it because it all looks the same. So what can we do? We can maybe manipulate the size of things. We can make the title, the name of the product, a little bigger. Looks a little better, but still not very good. What if we manipulate other things? If we manipulate the weight, the font weight, the font color, maybe the button color, and group the objects differently? So we can end up with something like this. We increased the font weight of the product name, so it clearly stands out. We de-emphasized the extra information. We made it gray. So it's now it's clear to us what are the most important elements of the page. And we grouped the price and the button together because the price is directly related to the action of purchasing something, of buying something. So you can do things like that. Here's another example I borrowed from a really good book called Refactoring UI. For designers, it's probably not going to be the best resource. If you're already advanced, you already know all this stuff. But I think for people who are non-designers, if you're like a developer, you're making products, if you have an e-commerce store, or if you are in any way involved in doing stuff on the web, if you're making websites or products, it's going to be very useful for you. So here we have a table. Everything looks the same. I don't know how you can read it. I guess if you really want to or need to, you can. We have the overview of data here, important numbers like total balance, investments, cash, is all really important information, but it gets lost here. We also have gain and loss percentage here. So if you're looking at this table, you're probably going to want to quickly see this information. right here. So this is how it should be designed. Of course, there are many different ways, but it's one of the good ways. So here, clearly, the overview is emphasized. You can quickly see the important numbers to you. The gain and loss is emphasized. It's much easier to read it, and if you compare it to the table right here, you'll actually see that the designer reduced the size of a lot of the text elements, yet it became much easier to read. So color, font weight, background color behind your text. These are super powerful tools that you can use to draw attention to specific elements on the page. And yeah, the book is just full of examples like that. So, you can quickly pick up very specific techniques for making things look better, but most importantly, for making things much more usable. Here's another example. So it's like a product card. Let's say you're uploading products to your site and you're publishing the product cards. Here you can publish it, you can edit, you can delete the listing. All the buttons here look the same. It's a problem. So you want to make it easy for your user to pick the most popular action. So people who are using this, who encounter this view, they're probably going to be publishing, maybe editing the listing in like 90% of the time. Sometimes they're going to delete it. Yet the delete button is actually the most prominent one here. It's bright red. So this is how it could be designed. Now you de-emphasized the delete listing button. It's now more difficult for the user to accidentally delete it. You're de-emphasizing the destructive, the bad action, and you're making it easier for them to see the positive, the most common, the most popular action to take, which is the publish action right here. Okay, so yeah, hierarchy is very important. Another thing that's super important in web design is contrast. So here you see it's not very easy to read. Maybe if you have really good vision, it's easy, but for many people with impaired vision, with poor vision, it's not going to be that easy, especially if the text is not that huge. Contrast is extremely important for readability, and readability is the most important thing for you if you have a website or a product. Your website or product is basically text. It's basically text styled in many different ways. You want it to be readable at all times. And if your text is not contrasty enough, it's going to be a problem for most people. It's going to be a huge problem for anyone who doesn't have a perfect vision. So, if you're not a designer, and even for many designers, I think it can be difficult to just look at things and see whether it's enough contrast. I think, I see a lot of products that have been designed by huge designer teams. And clearly, there are some talented designers working there, and there's often not enough contrast. And if you put it through a contrast checker, it's going to fail the contrast requirements. And yes, it's probably going to be fine for most people with really good vision, but people with impaired vision are just not going to be able to read it. And it's very important because you want to make sure that your website or product is inclusive of everyone. So there are many people with all kinds of disabilities, many people with impaired vision. You want to make sure that they can access your product. That's the beauty of the internet. Anyone can use the internet, and hopefully everything that's available on the internet will be accessible to everyone in the world. So just be mindful of things like that. And yeah, you can just Google contrast checker. And what you do is you just plug in two colors. You plug in the foreground color, which will be your text, background color, and you see if you hit the ratio requirements. It's very easy. It's a no-brainer, basically. You just copy the color code, and it tells you if it's good or not. And in general, I just encourage you guys to learn more about the accessibility on the web. Again, for those reasons I just mentioned, internet has to be an inclusive place for everyone. Of course, accessibility is much more than just color contrast. If there are any web developers here, you probably know a bit more about it. I think web developers are now very concerned with accessibility. So yeah, just look it up and learn about it. It's important. 15% of the world's population has some kind of disability, and none of you guys have immunity to having it later in life. We all get old, so hopefully we'll be able to read the websites that we're creating today when we're like 80 or something. Yeah, it's extremely important, and also as a business, you're excluding those people from your user base. You don't want to do that. And just to have a clean conscience, just be good people. Okay, so typography. Typography is very important. As I said, your websites and products are mostly text. So typography is extremely important. Use good fonts. Better yet, use good font. So the fewer fonts you use, the better. First of all, it's very easy to mess things up and make your website ugly by using too many fonts. If you're not a designer, it takes a lot of skill to be able to mix and match font and all kinds of font sizes and so on. Make it easy for yourself and pick one good font and just get the most out of it. And your website and product is going to look good. Just pick a good font. And I'm going to talk a bit more later about what is a good font. And then also it affects your website and app performance. Fonts actually take ages to load. So if you use too many fonts, it really affects the speed with which your website will load. So it's important. People don't want to wait. We can divide the fonts into two categories, which are serif fonts and sans serif fonts. All you need to know is that serif fonts have these little thingies, foot-like thingies, in their letters, and serif fonts have like a different vibe compared to sans serifs. They're a bit more traditional looking. Sans serifs are usually a bit more tacky, I don't know, more minimalist, but there are of course exceptions to that rule as well. There are many good fonts. There are both serifs and sans serifs, so it's really up to you which one to use. I think mostly long form content, most platforms use serif fonts. They're slightly easier to read. However, there are also many good sans serif fonts these days that you can use for long form content as well. So just do some research, really. I think the main thing I'm trying to get across here is that you have to be intentional about how you design your website or your application. And you ask yourself, why am I using this font? Is it just because it's pretty, or because it's also highly readable and it's just a high quality font? So there are many good fonts out there. These are just some examples. These are some sans serifs. These are some serif fonts. This is not showing up correctly because Auntie doesn't have it on her computer. No worries. But yeah, these are all free fonts, by the way. You can get them on Google Fonts. It's also something to be mindful of because a lot of the time, high quality fonts are extremely, extremely expensive. You would be surprised how much you have to pay for a good font, like thousands of dollars. So, you don't have to do that. Just use good free fonts and you can look it up. Whatever you're making, you can Google like best fonts for blog article, best fonts, best headline fonts, etc. So there are some fonts that are better in small sizes, some fonts that are better when they're big. They're very readable for headlines. So just do some research and pick a font that's good for your particular purpose. It's very important to pick the right font size. You want to make sure that it's readable. Of course, there are no like very rigid, strict rules here, and that's also a problem because you can't just be like, okay, I'm gonna decide to always use 16-point font and it's gonna be perfect all of the time. No, it's not gonna happen. But generally, for long form content, for like body copy on the web, you don't want to go below 16 pixel font size because it's not gonna be readable for many people. Line length is also very important, especially for long form content. So if you have an article that spans from one edge of the page to the other edge, it's going to be not readable. By the time you get to the end of the first line, you get lost. You don't know where you were reading. You don't know how to go back to the beginning of the second line. And for people with reading disabilities, it's even more difficult. So Again, there's no strict rule here, but around 66 characters per line is where you want to be for long form content. It's a range, so probably somewhere between 50 and 80, you're going to be fine. But this is what it looks like. This is not good. This is very difficult to read. That's why you don't see this on Medium, for example. They have done plenty of testing on readability of content. It looks more like this. It's more readable. And the problem is that oftentimes when you're using a font, the default values are not what you want. So the default value will look like something like this, and you have to manually manipulate the line length. Oh, actually, I'm talking about line height. Yeah, but yeah. So you have to learn a bit more about how to manipulate different values of fonts. The default values are not always the best. So yeah, I kind of skipped a little bit to the line height here. Line height is the distance between the lines in your text. Usually for most use cases, you will be able to get away with just using the default values. However, it's not always the case because it depends on font size and on line length. So large fonts need a little less line height. If you want to have like an oversized headline to your article, or in the hero section of your website, like on your landing page, and you use very large font, line height by default will be very, very big, and the lines can be so far from each other that they will appear not related at all. It's going to be very difficult to read it, so you actually have to manually reduce the line height. Small fonts, on the other hand, need more line height to look good, and even more if you're using a small font with long line length. So these are just some examples. So here, that's what I was talking about. I'm using an oversized headline. The lines just look way too far from each other. Actually, this line here is probably slightly closer to this text than to the first line of the headline. You don't want this to happen. This text is way too crammed. It's very difficult to read. You can manipulate the line height and make it look like this. Now it's much easier to read. And the last thing I want to talk about today is using more white space. It's something I think all designers fight with their clients about all of the time. Most clients want to cram more content into their page. There's such thing as talking about screen real estate and how you need to put more stuff there, which I understand. For some use cases, maybe it makes sense. For example, if you have a very complex dashboard, you have to show a lot of data, maybe it's fine. Most of the time, when you're creating a landing page or a product, you want to make sure you have enough white space, which is negative space around your content. So this is the content, this is the white space. It doesn't have to be white. Most of the time, actually, it's not white, probably. There's some background color or maybe a photo. But this is the space that actually draws attention to the content. And you don't want to make your content too crammed and make it difficult to see what you're trying to show to your customer. So here, for example, we have a newsletter sign up. Even though we have a huge call to action here, please sign up, it kind of gets lost. There's just way too much stuff everywhere. It's very difficult to see it. Even if here you have like sales copy, selling your awesome newsletter, it doesn't matter. What's going to work is something like this. You want the people to see the actual input field and to click the button. And really, they just, if they want to sign up for a newsletter, they're going to sign up. Don't make it difficult for them by creating something like this. So yeah, today we talked about design thinking, which is the methodology you want to use to create better designs, to make things that are truly usable for your particular customer. We talked about hierarchy, which is probably the most important thing, I would say. We talked about contrast, which is extremely important for readability. Typography, also extremely important for readability and for the looks of your website, of course. you see that I'm not focusing as much on the looks of things because, yeah, it's important, but it also, to some extent, subjective. Really, if you can do one thing, make sure that your product or website is usable. That's what you want. The looks, it can come after. If everyone made their product or website usable, internet would be a different space right now. Unfortunately, it's not the case. But if you do these things, what you're making will be at least usable and hopefully better looking as well. And yeah, white space. Make sure you use enough white space. Just let your content breathe a little bit. Usually, you need more white space than you think you need. And again, it does have to be white. Just make sure there's enough distance between things. So yeah, this is it. Thank you so much, guys, for coming. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. Also, the slides are available on my site. Anyone can download them. Just go to nadiaUX/Design/Dojo Talk and you can download the slides in a PDF. Also, I have a little link there to provide some feedback. If you love the talk, if you hated the talk, if you have some feedback for me to improve, there's like a 1-minute form. So I would really appreciate if you filled it out if you have time. If not, it's fine. So yeah, any questions, guys?
What sort of programs do you use when you're sort of manipulating a page around? You're changing the colors and the white space and stuff. What programs do you use to do that?
What
with?
programs?
Yeah.
Well, as a designer, I use Figma mostly and Sketch. If you're not a designer, you probably don't have to use them. Honestly, you can easily probably make these changes in like a website builder or what is your use case? What are you making? Uh-huh. Then if you do web development, I would say it's probably worth it for you to learn how to use Figma or Sketch. Figma is free. Sketch, you have to pay for it. So just use Figma. You can learn it in a couple hours and quickly iterate and just try different things.
Any more question?
So, what are cool websites or resources to keep up with design trends?
Yeah, good question. So I read a lot of news on Reddit. There are many design threads, subreddits that you can subscribe to. There's one called Design News, I think. It's really good. A lot of designers use it. There's a lot of fresh news there every day. The community is quite active, so you can learn a lot from there. It's probably more interesting for professional designers, though. If you're generally just interested in design and just want to look at good looking things and good design and what's new, there's a Chrome extension you can install called Musli, Muzli, which is really good. So every time you open a new browser tab, it shows you like different what's new in the design world. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, there are many different resources. Another website is called Designer News. A lot of people moved from Designer News to Reddit these days, but it's still, I think, pretty good for you to just go to and read what's new. They post about the latest tools, the latest trends, just different discussions. A lot of people there also code, so if you're a developer, it can also be an interesting community for you to kind of explore and see. You know, I think designers need to be friends with developers and vice versa. It's very important. If you're doing stuff on the web, yeah, developers, please learn design, and designers should learn to code, I think.
I was just wondering what font that is.
Yeah, lately it's been my favorite font called Poppins. It's a free Google font. I think it looks very cool. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Futura, which is not a free font, but it's also good looking. Yeah, it's Poppins. Google Fonts is full of crappy fonts too, so you kind of have to do your own research a little bit and dig a little deeper if you want to choose a good font.
Thanks for the talk. One question is, have you got any tools which would automatically kind of rejig things around and resize them and give enough white balance, etc.? So all the stuff you've gone across, is there anything which is out there which would do all that, and then you do more tweaking, takes a lot of the heavy lifting out?
You want to answer that? Yeah, as a designer, I'm not too concerned with that. I usually do things on my own.
So
but
there's like a website called Grid Lover, and it's like a really cool website where you can there's like a predefined presets for how your text should be, like the different the headings, the H1, the H2, all these things, how big they should be, how big the difference should be, and then it instantly gives you like CSS. If you want to use it, and like you can change different values if you want like fixed values or relative values, and you can also like tweak it with like very easily if you want it to be like bigger or smaller. But it's always based on the ratio, so it's always kind of visually balanced. It's really cool. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe one more question if there is any.
So for somebody that's interested in learning more about design, other than the information sites that you provided, what's a good path to take to learn more about it, get more experience, and then what's the general commitment required to consider yourself moderately talented designer? Like, how long does this path take to get there? Obviously a very subjective question depending on your
ages. Just hire designer. Well, it does take ages, but if we're talking about what's the path you have to take to learn more about design, and it's something that every designer is just continuously learning. There's like no stopping point. There are new things all the time coming out. But I don't know, there are YouTube videos like how to get started in design. If you're specifically interested in product design, I think you still have to know design basics. So learning design, like the basics of design principles, would be really good. There's a really good website called, I think, interactiondesignfoundation.org or something. I will send you some more resources on that, but that's a really good website that has a lot of information on the basic design principles that go beyond just product design. So it's something that every designer would learn in design school. But then they also have very kind of detailed articles and a lot of good stuff specifically on product design. There's no one clear path. There are so many different resources. You could be reading books, you could be watching YouTube videos. Above all else, you have to be designing. Like, you're not gonna become a good designer if you're just watching YouTube videos. You have to be sitting down and designing a lot of crappy products and websites, and then after some time, you will start designing good products and websites. That's the process, I think.
Okay, thank you. Let's give applause one more time for Nadia for a really good talk.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you
Also,
so very
reach
much
out
for
to
coming.
me. Reach out to me if you